My topic for today is Pirkei Avot, chapter 2, Mishnah 11, and this is the Mishnah which is brought by Rabbi Joshua. It's Joshua ben Hanania, one of the 5 students of Yochanan ben Zakkai who were mentioned in the previous Mishnayot of this chapter. Now, Joshua ben Hanania, what does he say? Ayin hara, an evil eye, which needs to be explained. V'yetzer hara, and an evil inclination, which needs to be explained. V'sinat habriot, and the hatred of people, which needs to be explained. Motzi'in et ha'adam min ha'olam, remove a person from this world, which needs to be explained. Well, where do we start? We'll start first with the dictum, and then I want to understand who Joshua ben Hanania is. Okay? Ayin hara. Now, if you remember before, in this parak, we also had this. It actually wasn't Rabbi Joshua who said this. But when they talked about the 5 students, and they said, what is the best way? It was Rabbi Eliezer who said, Ayin Tovah. A good eye is, meaning to look at everything, is the best way, right? It was Rabbi Eliezer, not Rabbi Joshua, he said that. If you remember in Mishnah Tet, Rabbi Eliezer said, Ayin Tovah, a good eye. And then when he said, what is a bad thing for a person to, a bad quality? So Rabbi Eliezer said, Ayin Ra'ah. So it's interesting that, and Rabbi Joshua said, Chavira. So it's interesting that this dictum is brought in the name of Rabbi Joshua. What is Ayin Hara? First of all, it means to look at others negatively. When you look at others negatively, it's an attitude, of course, towards others. For instance, the Talmud says, Hamistakel al hatvua b'komoteha. If you look at your neighbor's grain when it's at its height during the summer, right before the harvest, meaning he's prosperous, he's not going to be successful, and you look at it with a negative eye, meaning, why does he deserve to be so prosperous? Maybe I deserve it. This is good for nothing. He got his field inherited from the family. He's got all these people working for him. Why does he deserve it? I work hard. I don't have luck like him. Ayin hara. Ayin hara is, first of all, is an attitude. It's a very negative attitude towards the world. And when you have a negative attitude towards others, it's going to boomerang back to you. Like it says in Mishlei, K'mayma panim ala panim, ken lev ha'adam ala adam. The way you react to others, they will react to you. It's like seeing your reflection in the water. What you look at, that's what you get back. So Ayin hara, the way we treat other people, eventually it's going to come back to us. It's a boomerang. So even psychologically or sociologically, if you act this way to others, they're not going to be around there for you when you need them, even if they have that ability. Now, there's some people who are what we call in Hebrew sociomatim, that they only care about themselves. They're egocentric. There are people like that. And people who lack empathy. There are people like that. But there are others who are sensitive and do have empathy. But if you get on their bad side again and again and again, they're going to lack any enthusiasm in really helping you because they know exactly who you are. Now, thankfully, there are a lot of idealistic people who will also help people they don't like. But they're getting less and less. Anyhow, so Ayin hara, in a sense, you could look at it sociologically. You could also look at it metaphysically. In what sense, metaphysically? You're looking at your neighbor who's prosperous, and you are jealous. So you're looking in a negative way, and it's like a little prayer. Oh God, why is my life so bad and their life so good? You know, now we believe in the power of human prayers, even when they're in the heart. when they're genuine. So it goes up, if you want to illustrate it this way, to the heavens, and your question is looked into. Why is this guy's life better than yours? Now, if it's not, then obviously it's thrown out of court. But let's say you're right. So you opened up a Pandora's box now. They're going to look into that person's deeds, but now if that person does get punished, it's your fault. And then they'll look into your deeds to see if it was worth it. That's why we say on Yom Kippur and on Rosh Hashanah in the tefillah, in the prayers, Al tavo b'mishpat imanu ki lo yitzdak lefanecha kol chai. Do not scrupulously judge us, because we will never come out as white as snow. We never will be completely righteous. So please don't look into our transgressions, because we'd rather not. That's why the Talmud says that it's a person who is ma'avira midotav. If we can overcome our anger and look at others generously and gently, God will. That's a reason for God to look at us that way as well. So at the end, ayin hara has a boomerang effect too, and so it's really not worth it in the end. That's ayin hara. What is yetzer hara? An evil inclination. The Talmud says, "Hu yetzer hara, hu satan, hu malach hamavet." I think it's the Talmud in Baba Batra. It says there's really no difference between the evil inclination in man and satanic forces, which are also man-made in the end. That has to be explained. And the malach hamavet, because the Talmud says, "Ein mita b'lo avon." There is no death without some type of iniquity, without some type of reason. Of course, the Talmud also says that there were 3 people who died be'et yoshel nachash, and the only one to blame was the original serpent in the Garden of Eden, which means they were blameless. They had no sin at all. And because of this, they died because of that original serpent, because mankind became mortal. But the truth is there was no reason for them to die. But most of us, we have something. We're not perfect human beings. And so what is Yetzer Hara? Yetzer Hara means the fact that human beings are in physical bodies with physical needs and desires. And even though we have the faculty of reason, which can explain to us what to do, what not to do, and how to be moral and how not to be moral, as we know, human beings are not. If they are Homo sapiens, it's because they have a faculty of reason. Do they actually use it? Sometimes selectively. We have a tendency to follow our desires and our personal interests, as Rambam points out in his Guide for the Perplexed, Part 1, Chapter 2. So, because of this, we might be logical human beings, but we tend to use logic more than actually have not logic navigate and direct us in our lives. And this is because the forces, obviously, of the material, of the physical, are stronger, and the proof than the spiritual. So we might be a soul in a body, but unfortunately, so we might be a soul in a body, but unfortunately, the body has the upper hand. And the proof is very simple. If you hadn't eaten for a whole day, you don't feel so good. But if you haven't prayed in 30 days, you seem okay. Which is the best proof I can think of that the physical affects us more than the spiritual. It doesn't mean the spiritual doesn't affect us. It just means we're not aware of it. Because of this, the evil inclination is our basically animal instinct for survival, which is 100% okay. There's nothing wrong with the evil inclination if it's controlled, because that's what it means to be a human being, to let the mind control our instincts in the right directions. But we need them. We can't live without our physical inclinations and instincts. The Midrash says on the verse, and God looked at everything he created and he saw it was very good. So the Midrash says, it says very, that's the good inclination. Excuse me. Good, that's the good inclination. Very, that's the evil inclination. In other words, human beings have a good side, which is called the good, and then they have an evil inclination, which is called the very. It's the impetus to do things. As Rambam writes in one place, if it wasn't for the evil inclination, people wouldn't build houses, wouldn't build up businesses, wouldn't get married. Wouldn't. Once you harness this inclination to do good things, you can do a lot of good things. It's called the very. It's that motivator which pushes us forward. So we might have a motivation, we want to have a great business and make a lot of money, but then sometimes after a certain point we say, you know what? I succeeded in that. Now I want to help others. I want to do something good with this money. Or a person wants to have a great house because they want to impress everybody, and then say, you know, now that I have a great house, I want to have a great family to put in this house. Why should I just enjoy it myself? It was Mr. Carnegie who donated the money for Carnegie Hall in New York, who at the time, when he passed away, had $66 million. And at the beginning of the 20th century, $66 million was more or less like having a few $billion today. And he said that to go to your grave with $66 million is sinful. And therefore, he decided to give away the money to charity in many ways. So sometimes people come to this recognition and understanding. So Yetzer Hara is not intrinsically bad. Judaism does not believe, like Christianity, that human beings were born into sin. We believe that we have an inclination to evil because we have an inclination to physical, and physicality tends to be self-interest and egotistical. But that doesn't mean it cannot be controlled. It does not mean we cannot harness our inclinations for the good and become spiritual beings. We don't have to disconnect from the physical world to realize our spiritual side. We just have to cultivate it in the right direction, give it the right limitations and guidelines, and harness it. And as we know with all types of power, whether it's electricity or nuclear power, if you can harness it, you can maximize the benefit of these things. So obviously we can use our evil inclination for the good. And this is what God says to Cain when he sees that Cain is very broken, that God did not accept his offering. He says, Lama naflu panecha, why you look so sad, Cain? Haloim tetiv se'et. If you want to become better, you'll be able to deal with this. Him lo tetiv, but if you decide not to get better and get over this, la petach chatat rovetz. Sin is just waiting on the sidelines for you. Ve'elecha chukato, and it really wants you, it desires you. The sin desires you. Ve'atatim sholbo, but you can control it. It's a question of a decision in the end of the day. So, these three things, Rabbi Joshua says, Ayin hara, an evil eye, meaning looking negatively at others all the time. Yetzer hara, the inability to control and harness what we call the physical desires, which are totally natural instincts within the human being for survival. But if you can't harness them for the good, and the third one is sinat habriot, hating people. What does it mean, hating people? Constantly look around, as King David said, I said in my haste, all people just let you down and they're worthless. But you know, people have the same problems that we do, because we're also people. So sinat habriot means hating people in general. I don't want to be with people. All they do is hurt you and let you down. And they're all egotistic and egocentric and they don't care. And you know what? Yeah, there are lots of people like that. The world might even be 50-50. Hopefully it's a little bit better for the good side. But yeah, there are a lot of people like that. And especially when you look for places to do things and you need a position of power, even if it's for good reasons, somebody else of that under 50%. Who are the bad people? They will be waiting because they're always looking for the positions of power. That's why it's always a miracle where a good person gets into a position of power anywhere, not just in politics, because it's the bad people who want the power and the money. Now, if positions of power had no money and were totally controlled, the bad people wouldn't want them. That's another discussion. So the point is then, sinat habriyot, hating people. Now, what's the problem with these all three? They remove you from the world. Now, some people explain remove you from the world, and some of the mafarshim make you die young. I'm not going to the metaphysical, even though it's true that creates stress, ulcers, even physically this might be correct. But I understand this, differently. You cannot live in this world with such a negativity. It doesn't work. People will not talk to you. Take even if you're just egocentric because of the Yetzer Hara, if you're looking negatively at people all the time because of the Ayin Hara, and you start to hate people because things that happen in your lives which might have been justified at the time, you will not be able to function in this world. You have to learn to give that benefit of the doubt in order for those few people that you find who are genuinely good, and to be good doesn't mean 100% good, it means to be 60% good at least. When you find those people, you're going to miss them because everybody's bad and everybody's whatever. So you have to train yourself how to be involved in this world. A little bit of benefit of the doubt, a little bit of trying to ladun et adam l'chaf zechut, to look at people meritoriously, it's going to help you function. And if you can show that positivity in the end, people are going to be attracted to you like a magnet. Because everybody wants to be near a positive person, because it's something we all really wish for. We wish to be happy. We wish to be positive. We wish we had clear direction. That's why we're so attracted to people who seem to have it. Sometimes they don't, these people. It's just an image that they create. But the ones who genuinely have it, we find very impressive. So you might be a person like that. And if you're going to be so negative to the others, you're going to scare them off. And that's what it means to be removed from the world. You'll still be here. You'll be living your little island. Nobody will touch you. As Simon and Garfunkel said, I am a rock and I am an island, right? Remember their famous song. So you'll still be there. You'll be a rock, you'll be their island, but nobody will come near you. And that's what it means to remove yourself from the world. Now, before I continue, that's what I want to say about this Mishnah. I want to say a few words about Rabbi Joshua. And because he is a very, very interesting individual. These first two students who were mentioned of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkanos, and Rabbi Joshua ben Hanania are famous colleagues who we find in different arguments in the Braitot and the Mishnayot. For instance, the most famous one is the argument of the Tanor Shalachnai in Baba Metzia 49 or 59. An oven which we became impure. And the Talmud says if an oven became impure, so how do you rectify that? Well, the Torah says it has to be broken. So Rabbi Eliezer said, okay, you broke it, you break it, and remember these are stone ovens, but with the same stones you can now rebuild it, because you broke it, that's all the Torah required. Rabbi Joshua said, no, you have to break it and use different stones. And then Rabbi Eliezer, remember some of you now remember the story. Rabbi Eliezer said, what are you talking about? I'm correct, and I'm going to prove it. If I am correct, look outside. You see that tree? That tree is going to fly up in the air. So all the rabbis in the Sanhedrin looked out the Beit Midrash window. They saw the tree fly out in the air. Rabbi Joshua said, unfortunately, you don't learn halacha from trees, and therefore that's not a good proof. Rabbi Eliezer said, what do you mean? If I'm correct, you see that little river next to the Beit Midrash? It's going to go backwards. They all looked out the river. The river started going backwards towards its source. Joshua said, we don't learn halacha from rivers. Rabbi Eliezer said, if I'm correct, let the walls of this Beit Midrash fall down. And the walls started trembling. Rabbi Joshua put up in his hand and says, stop. Stop interfering in our arguments, walls. We're not part of these arguments. And the wall stopped. And finally, a heavenly voice came out and said, what do you want from Rabbi Eliezer? The halacha follows him in every single case in halacha. And Rabbi Joshua said, we don't listen to heavenly voices because it says in the Torah, lo b'shamayim hi. The Torah is not in heavens anymore. It was given to us. And the Torah says, acharei rabim lahatot, that you have to follow the majority, and the majority agree with me, said Rabbi Joshua. Now, very often when we hear that story, we get this impression that Rabbi Joshua is this die-hard halachist, and Rabbi Eliezer is this more spiritually oriented man of truth. But it's not exactly so. Rabbi Joshua is fighting this elitist concept of truth because he understands what to be a man of the people. And Rabbi Joshua was very much a humble man of the people. I'll give you an example. In the Talmud and Brachot, there's a story. Rabbi Gamliel, who was the president of the Sanhedrin at that time in the 2nd century, so he was very much into the new calendar, which at that time was not accepted yet, but had been formulated, the Hebrew calendar. And the Hebrew calendar was based on astronomical, precisional calculations. There was an argument about certain witnesses and when Yom Kippur was supposed to be. Rabbi Joshua felt we still have to go by witnesses. Rabbi Gamliel felt that the calendar should be used in cases where it's not clear about what the witnesses said. And they had an argument when Yom Kippur fell. And Rabbi Gamliel was afraid that Rabbi Joshua would say Yom Kippur would be on a different day because it had to do with the previous month. And he forced him to go publicly with his cane and his money bag in front of everybody on the day that, according to his calculation, would be Yom Kippur, just to show that the halacha doesn't follow that. And this happened 3 times. And by the 3rd time, when he made him stand up in the Sanhedrin as a punishment, Rabbi Joshua each time said absolutely nothing. So finally, the Sanhedrin ousted Rabbi Gamliel because they felt that this was too much already, that he was abusing Rabbi Joshua. But the whole time, Rabbi Joshua never said anything. And when Rabbi Akiva went to Rabbi Joshua, or sent somebody to Rabbi Joshua, and said, it's the time to make up, Rabbi Joshua had no problem. And he wanted Rabbi Gamliel to be the president again. This was a man who was very humble, very devoid of ego. He was dirt poor. He was a blacksmith. In the story, when somebody came to his house, it might have been, I think it was, I forget in the story who did. I looked inside, I think might have been even Gamliel. Came to his house and said, why are your walls so black? I see you're a blacksmith. And Rabbi Joshua says, woe for the nation whose leaders are so rich that they don't know the poverty of the Torah scholars. So Rabbi Joshua is really a man of the people. Rabbi Eliezer is very much what I call a true diehard scholar. But I just want to mention a little bit about Rabbi Joshua, just the things that we know about him. First of all, we know that his ordination from Yochanan ben Zakkai took place before the destruction of the temple. It was he and Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus, the ones who, as I said, had that famous debate in the Beit Midrash and Tanur Shalachnai. These were the ones who, when Yochanan ben Zakkai decided he must meet with Vespasian, who eventually was a Roman emperor, but at the time was the general, he asked 2 of his students to carry him in a coffin outside the city to make everybody think that he was dead, because you could only leave the city at the time if you had to bury people. Who are those 2 students? Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus and Yeshua ben Hananiah. Those were the 2 students he had total faith in, that they wouldn't leak the secret out. And Rabbi Joshua lived in Pirkei, a small town between Yavne and Lod. I mentioned the story of it when he was embarrassed by Rabbi Gamliel. I mentioned the story of Tanur Shalachnai. We know also, by the way, he accepted a woman proselyte into Judaism, who, because of her immoral past, she was rejected by Rabbi Eliezer ben Hyrcanus. In other words, but he realized that this woman had changed her life. And what happened, happened. And if somebody is sincere, you have to accept them. Another thing about his openness, it is Rabbi Joshua makes the famous statement that Chasidei Umot Olam, the pious Gentiles of the world, have a place in the world to come. And not only that, but in the Tosefta and Sanhedrin, and also in Sota 3, Mishnah 4, he also condemns foolish piety. People who are extremists because they just don't see the world in a balanced way. He was involved in Jewish-Christian polemics, which was interesting because Christianity was still a sect within Judaism at the time. He had great knowledge of mathematics, astronomy, even a Greek. And he was a man of peace. So when he says that these three things remove you from society and the world, he understands society and the world. He understands the need to be in dialogue with society and the world, even if you have problems and you're critical. Because we're put in this world to deal with it, not to live in a cave. If we wanted to live in a cave, we didn't have to come to this world. We could have stayed in the world to come, in the Garden of Eden. Everything would have been fine. But when you're in this world, you have to be in dialogue with the world. You have to deal with the world, and you even have to deal with the garbage of the world. So, and how do you do it? By flipping the coin, by having a good eye, by having a good nature, by loving people like this, like it said in chapter 1 of the sons of Aaron. And this will help you in your interdialogue with human beings. Shalom.